का लिमिटेशन होना चाहिए, फिक्स होना चाहिए।
ये अगली सुनवाई करके 5 साल निकाल लेते हैं, फिर बोलते हैं वापस लगेगा पैसा।
लिमिटेशन तो होना बहुत ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि यहाँ पर कोर्ट कचहरी के अंदर गरीब लोग, परेशान लोग पहले से बहुत परेशान होते हैं।
India's judiciary has once again come to the rescue of its citizens, with the Supreme Court asking centre to bring in a law to regulate legal fees.
The mind of the Supreme Court is known. It somewhere feels that justice is too expensive for the common man. It wants for the government to step in and take stock of the earlier Law Commission's recommendations and also bring in a policy which will then go on to regulate the alleged astronomically high fees charged by several councils.
But top lawyers of the country aren't convinced. They call this impractical to implement.
Fees are the things which can only be regulated by Bar Council or the Bar Council of India.
The junior lawyers, on the other hand, have lended support to the proposed regulation of legal fees.
There are several advocates who charges really a kind of the fee which normal people can't afford.
And I am of the view there has to be a cap on the fees of senior advocates.
Mirror now asks, is India unable to afford quality legal services? Is it time for government's intervention? Let's debate.
Good evening, viewers. You're watching the Urban Debate on Mirror Now. I'm Faye and thank you for joining us. It's a very, very interesting conversation. The Supreme Court has made some very pointed observations. It's basically said that lawyers have a specific role. They have a very important role in providing justice to ordinary Indians. And given the astronomical fees that lawyers are charging, it is preventing a lot of Indians from accessing justice. It is also suggested that the central government bring in a law or regulations that will actually place a floor and a ceiling on the fees that lawyers can charge. Is this practical? And is it the right thing to do? Now remember, we talked about a lot of governments now actually wanting to, to regulate doctors' fees or doctors' charges or hospital charges. If we're looking at doctors and hospitals, why shouldn't we also be looking at lawyers? The Supreme Court has also made a very interesting observation where it has said that just like public hospitals provide a service to public at a reduced cost, shouldn't we have a similar service for legal services provided to public as well? Because right now, the fees are just too high. Joining me on the show this evening, we have such a fantastic panel of speakers. Mr. Soli Sarabji is an Indian jurist and the former Attorney General of India. We're very, very proud to have him on the show. KTS Tulsi, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, also Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court. Arima Sundaram, Senior Advocate with the Supreme Court. Justice M.F. Saldana, former Justice, Mumbai High Court. Gaurang Kant, Lawyer with the Supreme Court. Shailesh Gandhi, former Chief Information Commissioner. Rajiv Mishra is an RTI activist. Gentlemen, I welcome you all to this conversation. Thank you so much for giving us your time. I'm going to go to Soli Sarabji once we have an okay on the audio. Let me start with Mr. Okay, all right, we have an okay on that audio. Mr. Sarabji, if you can hear me clearly now, where do you stand on the Supreme Court's opinion that senior lawyers are charging far too much and it's standing in the way of access to justice for the average citizen?
Well, there is some point in the Supreme Court's observation, because one thing you must remember, the legal profession is a service-oriented profession. It's not a commercial undertaking that you can charge any amount the client can pay. After all, you can't charge amounts which makes your services practically inaccessible to the marginalized sections of society. But any limitation must not come by way of legislation. It must come by the laws themselves realizing the position and charging fees which are moderate, reasonable, so as I said, the lowly and the lost, the sections of society can avail of the services, not they become absolutely inaccessible. And having said that, I would like to insist that I'm against any legislation in this behalf. The legal community, the legal fraternity should realize about the matter. Please bear in mind it's a service-oriented profession, it's not a commercial venture, and keeping that in mind, charge your fees accordingly.
Let me bring in Arima Sundaram. Mr. Sundaram, you're a senior advocate with the Supreme Court. Do you think it's practical to be able to cap fees of lawyers and say this is the maximum you can charge per appearance, per brief? Is that something that you think we might actually see happen?
Faye, I don't think it's practicable, and I'll tell you why. I don't think it's practical, but I must, before I say that, I must point out that there are three different aspects. I want to make one thing very clear. The question of shampoo and maintenance is something which is unlawful in India and ought to be abhorred. What we mean by shampoo and maintenance is when a lawyer takes a fee based on the stakes and says, I want a percentage of what I recover for you.
Yes.
Or who maintains an action for a person by saying, I will give you my services, I will ensure that you have no expenses, but from the any decree you get, I shall take X percentage. Now these things are totally impermissible and cannot be permitted at all. The other aspect is, I believe it is very possible for the Bar Council to step in and ensure that lawyers do devote a certain percentage of their time, do give time for pro bono work. I am a great believer in pro bono, and I believe that pro bono work is necessary to afford justice to people who need it and can't afford it, and in causes and cases which deserve it, and yet the fees that these lawyers would otherwise actually ask for cannot be paid. Now, those are the two avenues I'm very clear on. Outside that, I believe that a lawyer as a professional can value his own services, and valuing his own services can say that if you want my services, this is the fee I am charging you. If this fee is not payable by you, then I do not want to afford my services at all. Please contradistinct this too clearly what I'm talking pro bono. There I'm saying a lawyer has to do it. For the needy, according to me, there must be a certain amount of free legal aid work that every senior counsel does. There must be a number of cases that the senior counsels do free of charge for the needy. But having done that, I do not believe there should be any curb or imposition on the fees otherwise.
But Mr. Sundaram, you said the Bar Council has the ability to do that, but the report of the Law Commission of India, March 2017, raises serious questions about Bar Councils themselves and how they're mushrooming at the taluka level and how there's a serious need to regulate the functioning of Bar Councils. So wouldn't you say then, Mr. Sundaram, there is a need for regulation of the sector in general?
You know, Faye, that really brings out the wisdom of Mr. Sorabji's words. When Mr. Sorabji just earlier said, it's something for the lawyers themselves to understand and know they should do. It is not something which can be imposed from outside. Look at it this way. The government says the maximum fee you can charge is X amount and you must give your services for that. Now, a person who could have got my services for a fee I would have been willing to charge. Now I say, look at the fee which I'm meant to give for this. I don't want to work at all. I don't want to do it. I need not do that. I'll give my time to something else. I'll write articles. I'll do something else. So that kind of imposition, you cannot, see, you can impose on price of goods to be sold. But for the price of a legal acumen of a person, a medical acumen, the kind of skill a person is imparting, is giving, has learned. Now to put a value on such a skill is something highly impractical, and I believe will be tried for the first time in history. If it's done now, I don't think from times immemorial. Any time, even Caesar paid for the skill, what he felt the skill deserved and what the person who had the skill felt he should get. That, I feel, is impractical.
KTS Tulsi, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha, Senior Advocate. Mr. Tulsi, do you believe that the central government might actually be able to bring about a law like this, and do you believe that it's warranted at this point?
No, I only hope and pray that they don't, because the question is that independence of the bar is as important as the independence of judiciary. And for that, the bar must be independent of the government. It must be independent of the judges. It has to be completely independent to be able to regulate its own conduct, just as in journalists have their own code of conduct. And they don't, we in the courts have fought hard to ensure that the censorship, pre-censorship or undue intrusion into the working of the media is not permitted. We must ensure at all costs that the independence of the bar is not impinged upon either by the government or by anyone else than the lawyers themselves. And you see, we do hundreds of cases. All my life I have done hundreds of cases every year without any fee at all. And I think that's our obligation, and we feel that the society, the justice system has given us so much that we owe an obligation to be able to help out the needy and the deserving. But
Mr. Tulsi,
I'm totally opposed to any idea where...
Yes. Mr. Tulsi, you said, of course, that you believe that it's your obligation to do cases for free or pro bono work, but it's not mandated, and there isn't a mandated number of hours that you have to, provide to free work or pro bono work. Do you believe a mandate might solve the problem?
No, anything which is mandated will become then a ruse for intrusion into the independence of the bar. We don't hold a post. We are not appointed. We can't, we have a code of conduct already. We can't solicit, we can't have contingency fee. But within our code of conduct, we should be entirely free. Within that code of conduct, and this code of conduct must rest with the lawyers and the lawyers' body.
Okay.
The disciplinary body of the lawyers, and it must not be given either, no authority should vest with the government of being able to tell the lawyers who are not in any employment. They don't hold, they're not been chosen by anyone. For us, it's a client who chooses his lawyer, and that is based, the relationship is based on trust and faith. Somebody has faith in one person, another person has faith in another person. So long as my time is available, I must not say no to anybody.
Well, Mr. Tulsi, while that's a fair thing to say in an ideal world, this entire conversation came up because of one particular case in the Supreme Court, and this was the 5th of December, where the lawyer in question had his client sign blank checks in lieu of payment and then deposited those checks. And this client was someone who was seeking damages for the death of her husband. And she turned around, and after she had made all of the payments, said, you can't put that check in. The check was dishonored because she didn't have the money. So while what you say idealistically, saying that it's based on trust, might not always be the case. And I want to bring in a couple of non-legal voices.
No, that may be professional misconduct under the existing rules.
Okay. So, Shailesh Gandhi, do you...
No, it may be professional misconduct even under the existing rules.
Shailesh Gandhi?
Yes.
I was very pleased to hear what appeared to me to be fairy tales.
How so?
The truth is, 80 to 85% of India's population does not approach a court even if it needs to. It goes to a police station but not to the courts. The difference between the lowest and the highest charges amongst the lawyers is probably 1,000 times. It's 100, not 100 times, 1,000 times is the difference. Any regulation that is brought in is not going to work, as rightly pointed out. It's not a matter of independence, it is just not workable. And in case we do that, that will be another fiction. It will be like our expense limit for elections. everybody will spend in black.
Yes.
Everybody will take in black, and that would be the least desirable situation. But I'm surprised that the Supreme Court is seized of this, whereas it is in its hands to bring down the cost of legal intervention through courts by a very simple thing. A law with the Supreme Court is already there. In CPC, no more than 3 adjournments are permitted. Yet this law is violated through and through, day in and day out in all our courts. If this itself was implemented, a law being implemented by courts is all I'm asking for, the cost for legal intervention in courts would go down considerably. Instead of focusing on things like this, we are focusing on things where there is no chance, absolutely no chance that it will happen. Why don't we focus on something more relevant? And I'm sure all the lawyers will agree that lesser adjournments and having a cap on adjournments would and reduce the cost also for litigants.
Right. राजीव मिश्रा, हमारे बॉलीवुड में एक डायलॉग है जो लीगल और कोर्ट्स के बारे में सबको याद है, तारीख पे तारीख, तारीख पे तारीख, तारीख पे तारीख, which is what Mr. Gandhi is talking about. Or there was one person who spoke to us one of our reporters and said the same thing. Date निकालते legal fees बहुत महंगे हो जाते हैं. तो राजीव मिश्रा, what is happening on the ground? Do you actually believe that lawyers and legal representation is inaccessible to the average Indian?
पहले तो मैं आपको धन्यवाद अदा करता हूं कि आपने मुझे इतने बड़े बड़े पैनलिस्ट के साथ बिठाया है. दूसरा बात मैं कहना चाहता हूं फे कि आज जो जस्टिस मतलब जो कोर्ट है उस पर सबसे ज़्यादा निगाह आज के समय में लोगों की टिकी हुई है, क्योंकि क्या है कि आज जो विधायिका और कार्यपालिका को जो काम करना चाहिए था वो नहीं होने के चलते लोग ज़्यादातर कोर्ट की ओर जा रहे हैं और कोर्ट से उनका एक बहुत बड़ा आशा है. अब मैं एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात आपको मैं बताऊंगा. जो हमारे 3 पैनलिस्ट जो हमारे सीनियर वकील हैं जिनकी मैं बहुत इज्जत करता हूं, उनका डिबेट मैं सुनता हूं, उन्होंने एक सच्चाई आपसे छुपाई है पे, जो मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूं. वो ये है कि बार काउंसिल, एवरी बार काउंसिल हैज़ ए रूल कि किस वकील का कितना फीस होगा. 10 साल से जूनियर लॉयर का कितना फीस होगा और 10 साल से सीनियर लॉयर का फीस कितना होगा. ये एवरी बार काउंसिल हैज़ ए रूल और वहाँ डिसाइडेड है. ये लिस्ट ये लोग कभी भी कोर्ट के बाहर टांगते नहीं है कि किसका कितना फीस होना चाहिए. देखिए मेरे पास मैं डॉक्यूमेंट्स के साथ आया हूँ, ये आपको दिखाता हूँ. ईयरली लॉ रेफरेंस 2007. आप यहाँ पर देख सकती हैं इवन नोटिस से लेकर के केस के फाइलिंग से लेकर के केस के लड़ने तक ये सब यहाँ डिसाइडेड है बार काउंसिल के द्वारा. बट लेकिन मुझे बहुत अफसोस है कि मेरे जो 3 बहुत ही वरिष्ठ वकील जिनकी मैं दिल से इज्जत करता हूँ, उन्होंने इस सच्चाई को थोड़ा आपसे दूर रखा. और फिर हमारे देश की एक बहुत ही सुंदर जो व्यवस्था है कि हमारे यहाँ कायदा हर संदर्भ में बना हुआ है. इवन जहाँ हम जस्टिस पाने जाते हैं वहाँ भी हमारे लिए कायदा बना हुआ है. लेकिन दिक्कत यह है कि हमको बताया नहीं जाता है, हमारे सामने ट्रांसपेरेंट नहीं रखा जाता है उस बात को, जिसके चलते आज हम यहाँ पर जो एक करप्ट सिस्टम है उसका हम शिकार हो रहे हैं. बस यही मुझे दुख है कि आज मैं जिन लोगों की बहुत ज्यादा इज्जत करता हूँ आज उन्होंने भी एक सच्चाई को थोड़ा दूर रखा.
Arima Sundaram, you want to respond to that? Does the Bar Council have a rate card that lawyers don't make public and don't adhere to?
Well, Faye, I'm really surprised to hear this because I was not aware that the Bar Council had mandated any rate. I don't know whether the Bar Council had said the minimum fees to be charged for something like XYZ is so much. But to the best of my knowledge, there is no Bar Council in the Bar Council of India or the Bar Council of Tamil Nadu or anything which has imposed a maximum legal fee by any lawyer. To the best of my knowledge, there is no such thing. And if there is something, I'd be quite happy to be educated by Mr. Mishra.
सुंदरम साहब को मैं दिखाना चाहता हूँ महाराष्ट्र बार काउंसिल जो है उसका ये मेरे पास ये बुक है लॉ रेफरेंस, आप देख सकते हैं. ईयरली लॉ रेफरेंस 2007 का मेरे पास बुक है और इसमें बहुत ही क्लियर है सुंदरम साहब, एक एक चीज आपकी एक एक लीगल फीस का इसमें पूरा वर्णन है, एक एक लीगल फीस.
पर ये देखना पड़ेगा राजीव मिश्रा जी की ये सजेशन है, ये मैंडेटेड है,
ये I think that is to be awarded by the court.
Yes.
I don't know whether that is the fee to be charged or awarded by the court.
Okay. Well, Mr. Gandhi is looking at it. I'm just going to bring in our other 2 panelists as well. Justice Saldana.
This is called a guideline.
Yes, it's a guideline. Yes.
But whether guideline or mandatory, I think people should be aware of it. The fact that nobody is aware of it
is worrying.
And therefore it shows that mandating fees is absolutely impractical. It's not going to work. The law will be defied even on this.
और एक important बात फिर और मैं बताना चाहता हूँ कि
one second, Raji Mishra, I'll come back to you. I just want to bring in the rest of my panelists as well. Justice Saldana, Gaurang Kant haven't spoken yet. Justice Saldana, where do you stand on this matter? Do you believe that legal fees ought to be capped in some way, or is there a different method with which we can make sure that everybody has access to fees? And here's my question. Mr. Gandhi said that the difference between what a junior and a senior lawyer would charge runs in the thousands. By that argument then, junior lawyers should be accessible to people who cannot afford senior lawyers. Justice Saldana, can you hear me?
Oh, linked? No, I can't. I thought, thank you, Faye. I thought you had forgotten that I was here.
No, I apologize. My question to you, Justice Saldana, is do you actually believe that capping of the fees is the best way to ensure access to legal services?
Can I speak? Can you hear me,
Yes,
Faye?
yes, we can hear you. Please carry on. Please go ahead.
Hello. Yes. See, I'll be very brief. I've been a lawyer for over 40 years and a judge for 16 years, and it has always, from the time I joined the profession, it has deeply distressed me that lawyers, it was very rightly pointed out by my senior colleagues, lawyers are really social architects. Lawyers are professionals. They are not commercialists or traders. Now, my view has always been that this is a matter of deep-seated ethics. No law can bring about any type of enforcement. You cannot enforce it. I'll ask you a simple question. How do you assess skills? How do you assess quality of work? And how are you going to prescribe a scale of fees? Cap means what? Now take, you see, you require immense skills when you go to the Supreme Court for the admission of a special leave petition. It may be a matter of minutes, but these are special skills. In the trial courts, the lawyer has to slog for 5 hours for probably weeks and months together. So the whole idea is impractical, but I support the principle. I think it is high time that the Bar Council or the government, or we'll have to think very carefully how to enforce it. What we require is commitment, Faye. We require commitment. And I'm very happy, in fact, when Mr. Sundaram pointed out that one of the means of doing this would be to request. We did it in Bombay. I can tell you, before I left the bar in the last 2 years, on behalf of the Bar Council, we requested the senior lawyers. I can tell you, speaking for myself, that I had a commitment, and I charged reasonably high fees from those who could afford it. But there's a class of people to whom I never charged anything, and I felt that the earlier fees would cover the latter. And I used to do at least 50% of my time, I used to consciously devote it. Now, can you tell a lawyer that he has to take up a case? No. So it can't be regulated by law. This has got to be done through deep-seated commitment, and how to bring that about is a matter which we'll have to look into. Now, I can tell you that through the years I was judge in Karnataka and in Maharashtra. We had the Judicial Training Academy, and we used to train both lawyers and judges in ethics. You see, this is really a matter of ethics. It's not a matter of enforcement, it's a matter of compliance. And therefore, one of the things, you see, there are instances when specialists are required. There are difficulties in various cases, and if the lawyers who are doing reasonably well can voluntarily say that we'll take up cases pro bono, not necessarily pro bono. Now, one of the things which I was on the government panel for 16 years when I was in Bombay, And one of the things I requested, because the government, very often, there are good issues which are required to be defended, which are required to be enforced. And the government is most of the time hopelessly short because they cannot afford to match fees in the private sector. So one of the things which I did personally, I was head of the Bar Council Legal Aid Committee, etc., etc. I requested all the senior lawyers in the Bombay High Court to agree to the extent possible to appear for the government. It may be that the fees which the government pays are peanuts, it's pittance. And believe it or not, Faye, believe it or not, every single one of them agreed and they did it. We had set up what's called an A panel. So these are the things which need to be taken up. And I don't see why the Bar Council cannot apply itself to it. It is the functioning of the Bar Council today at all levels, at the state level.
Right, we seem to have lost that connection. But let me go over to Mr. Kant, who joins us in Delhi. Mr. Gaurang Kant is a lawyer with the Supreme Court. Mr. Kant, I'm holding in my paper a published notification from the Supreme Court of India dated the 27th of May 2014. And it actually says that these are, as such, the Chief Justice of India official gazette, these are the rules hereby that the Supreme Court is putting forward. Second schedule, fees payable to advocates, defending of appeals, leading counsel, fee on brief not exceeding 24,000, refresher not exceeding 24,000, undefended appeals, one fee 14,000, no refresher, petitions on special leave, leading counsel 8,000, no refresher. It goes on like this. There are 3 pages. Were you aware of this this notification, and is it being followed in the Supreme Court, Mr. Kant?
Well, I'm not aware of any such notification, and probably the notification which you're relying upon might be a government notification, a schedule which has been prescribed for government lawyers. But I'm not aware of any such notification which actually prescribes any sort of cap on the senior lawyers.
Okay.
And most of the panelists who are sitting out here are much senior to me in profession. You know, I've only put in 20 years in the profession. But the fact remains that when we talk about putting a cap on the fees, yes, the legal profession, as Mr. Sorabji has pointed it out, it's a service which is being rendered to people, and it's not a commercial thing. But at the same time, what Mr. Sundaram was saying about pro bono work, yes, definitely that's a step forward, and we must do pro bono work, and the senior counsels need to do that. But what Mr. Gandhi was also pointing out, that there's a huge difference between the senior advocates and the other lawyers who charge fees. You know, there's a huge gap between them, which is to an extent true, to the extent that yes, those senior lawyers are designated seniors and they have a better acumen to present their cases, but at the same time there is something called, which we have to, you know, take it with a pinch of salt. They have a better face value, and that is the reason why the corporates and the big clients go after them, and they are the ones who are definitely able to get them what they want, and there's a distinction between that. But at the same time, I think you can't really regulate fees as such, but you can definitely put some sort of a balance in there. And what Mr. Sundaram was pointing out is correct, that if pro bono work is being done, I think the whole idea of reaching justice out to common people can be served through that. It's just that the government of India also has initiated pro bono work right now. There's a, on the Ministry of Justice, there's a link which is there, and people can register themselves. I don't know how many lawyers would have done that and how many senior counsels would have done that, but there are ways. So even the pro bono work, when we talk about it, needs to be regulated. There has to be some way where it can be monitored. So I think the Bar Council, again, as what Mr. Tulsi was trying to point it out, is that we need certain sort of a regulation from the Bar Council, and I think that is the independent body which actually governs all of us as lawyers. So I think that body needs to really step in and provide some sort of a framework or guideline according to which we all can work. And when it comes to pro bono should not only be restricted to certain class of people, but it should go to everyone. and all these senior lawyers can be accessible. So there has to be some sort of a platform on which we know that, we can approach them, we can get them. So, some sort of a regulation needs to be there to really man this.
I just want to read out that the Supreme Court has pointed out that the 131st report submitted by the Law Commission in the year 1998 specifically talked about astronomical fees, and no effective law has been enacted since then to regulate those fees. And this is what the Law Commission said. It said, one can seriously question, though evidence is concrete, no one can question that fees charged have reached astronomical levels. And this was in 1998. There may be a class of litigants who can afford it, but it's a microscopic minority. And the legal profession enjoys a monopoly through that statute passed by Parliament. It is the duty of Parliament to prescribe fees for services rendered by the members of the legal profession. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, you're reading that gazette that I handed out to you.
This is Supreme Court rules notified on 27th May 2014. It is clearly applicable to all lawyers practicing in the Supreme Court. And the truth is, we are unaware of it. This is a confidential rule. Nobody knows about it.
What rules?
And the painful thing is, senior lawyers don't know about it. And I'm not talking of these particular lawyers, neither the judges. Supreme Court has asked the government whether it can consider. But then why is this rules there?
Okay, so let me just go back to our senior panelists right now, Mr. Sarabji. What's your response to this document, which is apparently Supreme Court rules that were notified on in 2014? Do you believe this is applicable? Is it not being followed?
I'm hearing about it for the first time, but are they mandatory? Are they directory?
It doesn't say.
Look,
it doesn't say guidelines. It doesn't say mandatory. It doesn't say suggestion.
Legal
actually.
imposition.
Yes, go ahead.
No, the point is, lawyers don't live on love and fresh air. They do charge fees.
Yes.
So the whole question is, the fees they should charge should be not of such a nature that the services are unavailable to the needy sections of society, to the marginalized sections of society. And that all depends ultimately on the lawyer himself. The lawyer must himself realize that he is not a commercial undertaking is running. After all, in this case, if lawyers charge astronomical fees on the guise of appearing pro bono and make up for the pro bono work by charging astronomical fees, that's no good. Name them and shame them. That's the only thing you can do. But no legislation will work, and there will be various ways of circumventing it. The lawyers must realize, I repeat, that we are professionals. It's a service-oriented profession, and it's not that we work on the laws of demand and supply and can charge anything on that basis. That's the basic thing the legal fraternity needs to be completely sure of, and they should be instilled in their mind that they should act accordingly. Sorry, I'm sort of a little mad.
Well, we understand that you live in Delhi and it's still quite polluted in Delhi. I'm going to go across to Mr. Tulsi. Mr. Tulsi, how can we get all lawyers to be aware of what Mr. Sarabji has said, to be more understanding perhaps of the circumstances of their clients? Or is naming and shaming then the option?
You see, the question is that a lawyer is rendering some very valuable service to his client to be able to get him justice. Now, the time, it's a personal service. You can't delegate this to anyone else. You have to understand the case, prepare it, present it, and you can only do so many cases or not more. And therefore, whenever someone is desperate to engage you because of whatever reason, he has some faith in you or he has heard about you, they insist that you take another matter. Now, of course, we have to remember that this is a professional service. And we must have our own ethical standards.
Yes.
We must be alive to this, to the question that there are millions of people who are not able to afford a lawyer. Although fortunately in India there are lawyers which are available even to the poorest of the poor. But they will accept the kind of fee by which they will not go unrepresented. But nevertheless, there is a limitation to the time that is available with any lawyer, and if he is in demand, he is not going to be able to take all those cases. I do believe that the government must ensure, there can be a law under the Advocates Act that whoever gets a license to practice will have to work in the rural areas for 2 years, and the government will pay them a nominal amount or whatever is considered to be a reasonable amount for the services rendered. That will be one way of ensuring the access to justice even in the rural areas. And I really think that it's important that the independence of the bar is not impinged, not allowed to be impinged by anybody.
Yes. Okay.
We have to fight the governments, we have to fight the corporates, and we have to have the ability to take them on. Only then the justice system remains efficacious. You can't denude the lawyer of his right. Of course, we follow the cab rank rule that if a person has come to you, you will only charge the normal fee and you will not pretend to be busy and then double your fee. That's not what is ethical.
Yes.
And the same cab rank rule is followed in England, which is adopted by us, that we cannot say no to a matter merely because the client can't afford to pay your normal fee. So,
but you know, I just want to bring in one more thing, which is
responsibility to the society.
Yes. And this is data that we've gathered, that on an average, apparently, fairly senior lawyers or senior advocates charge 3 to 7 lakh rupees per appearance
25
on regular affairs.
25 lakhs.
For final arguments, seniors charge 10 to 15 lakhs per appearance, perhaps in the Supreme Court. Mr. Sundaram, I have this very quick question for you. If we cap or we limit the fees,
name them.
Name them. If we cap the fees, Mr. Sundaram, would we be also limiting the competition, the drive to rise to the top of the game, to become the best, just plain old open market, philosophy?
Faye, I think to an extent, as a lawyer who's very proud of being a lawyer, I think you're trivializing it to say that the only incentive for a lawyer to want to be at his best and perform at his best and to be a top lawyer is monetary gain. I'm sorry that all of us, when we joined the profession, we wanted to be very good lawyers because of the desire to be good lawyers, not because we said if we're good lawyers, we're going to earn so much. So let's not get that mixed up. I'm afraid that the entire issue is getting mixed because of two different aspects which are being put together, whereas they aren't really some things which go together. One is accessibility to justice. Everybody must have access to justice. The poorest of the poor must have access to justice. Everybody must. For that, we have things like legal aid, we have pro bono work, the doc briefs given by the court itself asking a lawyer to please appear for somebody who can't afford it and who's appearing in person because he can't afford a lawyer, and the judges say, will Mr. So-and-so please appear for him? And let me tell you, the lawyers always say yes. Now, on access to justice is what I'm saying. Every senior lawyer must make himself available, when required, for a poor to have the access to justice, whether it is through the legal aid or whether it's to a doc brief, whether it's to being appointed by the court to assist a party, whatever reason, or by a needy coming to him and him willing to take up so much pro bono work. That is access to justice. The other aspect is what you're talking about, a cap on fees. Now, assume we put a cap on fees. Can the poor of the poor, let's say your cap on fees is 50,000 rupees or whatever was being said. Can the poorest of the poor afford that 50,000 rupees? So we're not talking there about access to justice of the poorest of the poor. We're talking basically about why should lawyers charge so high fees? Why should they be in a capacity to earn so much? Now, who are they earning that from? They earn that from people who can afford to pay that, because it's only the person who can afford to pay that who is paying it. And what does that person require? A lot of skill being put in otherwise. The moment you start capping, I'm worried where you go to. Do you tell an artist, I'm sorry, cap your painting at so much, you shall not charge more? Do we tell an author, sorry, you shall only charge so much for every book that you write, you cannot charge more? I mean, these are all professionals where skills are being used, and a person then assesses his own skill, values his own skill, decides what his skill is worth. Obviously, is charging that only to the person who can afford it. There's no question of charging it to the person who can't afford it. But what is important is, when a person who cannot afford it comes to him for assistance, and he is deserving of that assistance, it is something which he needs to be assisted on, then it is an innate duty. It is a professional pride for a lawyer to say, yes, I will help you. And in that case, you're not even capping fees, because you don't charge any fees at all. It's not as though I will charge only X amount to assist you. You do it pro bono, and that's a duty. And that duty, when fulfilled, is also part of our professional pride. So please understand that it is not money for which we all wanted to achieve the maximum of our professional expertise. It's putting it down very cheaply by saying that. We all wanted to be excellent lawyers because we wanted to achieve a certain mark in the profession. And that mark was not decided by money.
Right. Mr. Very well
let's not
put.
get that mixed up here.
Yes, very well put, Mr. Arimasundaram, and very interesting points being brought forward. For our viewers who've just joined us, the debate right now is on whether or not lawyers' fees should be capped. And remember, this is an observation made by the Supreme Court of India. Mr. Tulsi is saying that the Bar Association, considering they have to go up against big corporates, considering they have to go up as lawyers against governments themselves, must always be independent of any interference whatsoever. Soli Sarabji saying anyone who cheats a client or does any sort of misdemeanor in the legal profession should be named and shamed, and we should separate the good sheep from the bad so that we don't paint the entire profession black. And Arimasundaram is making a very, very good point. He says access to lawyers and legal services is paramount here. We shouldn't confuse it with capping of fees. They might not actually result in the same thing. I have a couple of people on the phone line, lucky viewers today who will have the opportunity to speak to our very senior panel. Benin on the phone line from Jhansi. Benin, go ahead. Okay, we'll come back to our viewers. Mr. Gandhi, you had something to say, and I'm going to go back after that to MF Saldana, but our viewer basically said that judges should not adjourn cases that much. Because which agrees with what
there
you
is
said.
a law. Please understand. What I'm seeing is, today India is amongst the 10 worst countries in terms of percentage of under trials in our prisons. Yes. And justice is not available to them. Let's stop fooling ourselves around and saying there is pro bono work. Or given all that, the really poor do not get justice. Most of the poor do not come to a court because they just imagine that they cannot approach a court. Most of our mafia operates because the justice system does not deliver. Having said that, the fact is we have a set of Supreme Court rules which the Supreme Court itself is probably unaware of. And that's why it's asking the government to do something.
We'll fax
nobody is aware of.
We'll fax it to all of our panelists. But I'm going to go to Justice Saldana here. Justice Saldana, if you can hear me. Justice delayed. So the whole point of cases being adjourned, taking a very long time to get through, if we speed up that process, will we have solved some of the problem, if not all of it?
Well, I'm inclined to agree wholeheartedly with what Shailesh said. It's a major problem because, you see, the judiciary, we respect them. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of overhaul and reform which is required to be done as far as the judiciary is concerned. And unless that comes, you're not going to get anywhere in this question of delivery of justice and the quality of justice. But having said that, I only want to make one small point.
Yes, please.
That Mr. Sundaram was right when he said, and so I agree with Mr. Sorabji, that you see the senior lawyers at certain levels and certain places, they do charge very high fees, but there's a justification for it. You see, they're not extorting it, they're not hurting anybody when they charge the high fees, because they deliver the goods and because people voluntarily come and they want it. Now this is something which you cannot upset. Now I referred to what we did in Bombay when I was still a lawyer, and we found that it's all very good to talk about pro bono, but when it comes to actualities, I cannot request Mr. Sorabji, you see the human limitations to everybody, every law, every human being. I cannot request him to refuse or set aside some important matter and then take up other ones. So what we did was, we requested the senior lawyers, and I'd like to tell you this, and I'd like Mr. Gandhi and I'd like the population of this country to also know that we requested the senior lawyers who were earning a lot of money to set aside, instead of saying that I will give 25% of my time where there were practical difficulties, we requested them to give 25% of their earnings or whatever they're willing to give to a fund which we created. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I think those donations or contributions were tax-free. That's incidental. But with that money, we were able to engage lots of the medium scale or the other lawyers for whom it is impossible to do pro bono work because they're not well to do. And we used that money in order to get legal aid. All those people who couldn't afford legal aid, they got reasonably good assistance because of this. And it was really a crystallized form of pro bono coming from the lawyers who couldn't physically do it. So these are various areas which we've got to look into, Faye, and I think we can really work out something good. But I'm inclined to, I'm sorry to say this, but having been a judge myself, I think nobody can say a word about many of the wrong things that are happening in the courts, and a lot of overhaul is required there. So let's not only point a finger at the lawyers, because the lawyers, again, senior or junior, are dependent on how the system runs.
Well, that's a brilliant suggestion. I'm going to come back to that. But Binam Shukla on the phone line from Mumbai. Go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. It's an honor to really talk to you people. I've been working in MSCT claim compensations across India. I have been closely working with the MSCT cases that have been filed. I think this case is also referring to MSCT fees to advocates in MSCT cases.
Yes.
First of all, what I would like to say is that there are poor people. Poor people have no access to police stations. They have no access to hospitals. They have no access to a body where they can reach for their compensation. So what they do, the lawyers are there, the ambulance chasers, they only build up their case and then they bring it to the limelight.
Yes.
So this is how, see, lawyers not only charges the amount of, his fees, he charges whatever money he invests in getting those cases. This is the real problem we have to see. And recently what I've observed, that there are in MLCT Madras, in Tamil Nadu, what they have said is that the fees, the compensation will be directly transferred by NEFT to the claimant's bank account. But here you see, what happens is a bank manager or a bank person comes, he opens the accounts on the tab. What he does, he hands over the welcome kit to the claimant lawyer only. So what I am saying is the problem is the literacy level and the poor person his incapability in getting the money.
Whether or not people know their rights, that's very important. And like we said in this particular case as well, the lawyer had the client sign blank checks before even starting work, and that's where the problem came from. Chaman Singh joins us on the phone line from Himachal Pradesh. Mr. Singh, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody there.
Good evening. Go ahead. We can hear you.
A simple question.
Yes.
ये टाइम खत्म हो गया.
all these respectable, honorable lawyers.
Yes.
I am a retired person having X amount of this pension
Yes.
as my monthly income.
Right. And your
Can
question
I
is, sir?
afford to hire these respectable lawyers in case I want to?
All right. So, well, this isn't so basically you want to know if you can hire one of these respectable lawyers, but like they all said in the beginning of the show, that if there is a client who needs help, none of them would ever turn away a client for lack of ability to pay the fees. Gaurang Khan, I want you to respond to the suggestion made by Justice Saldana of yes, 25% of earnings being put in a fund that will be used for legal services for poor people. Is that something that we can implement? Will that solve the problem?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that system is already in place. We have the Legal Services Authority, which exists in almost all the states, and the government also contributes a lot of fund towards that. And as far as the lawyers are concerned, the Bar Council can always make certain regulations whereby the lawyers can always contribute to that effect too. But I think the Legal Services Authority is always there providing services to the needy and poor. But then the question over here remains that will the litigants, the people who can't really afford legal aid, will they be able to afford the senior lawyers, the lawyers like the person who has been calling right now? Can he afford the lawyers whichever he wants to? So to make that accessible, I think it is important that the Bar Council regulates or have the lawyers provide some sort of a pro bono services. They have a mandatory period or duration or number of cases which they can actually do. So some sort of a regulation needs to be there. Like in the United States, we have the CLE programs whereby the lawyers keep on contributing towards pro bono work and they earn credits through that. So the same sort of thing which should be implemented by the Bar Council here. So certain regulations need to be put in place whereby the needy can also have access to the best brains of the country and they can get the best lawyers if they feel like.
That's right. And Mr. Tulsi, I'm just going to ask a question of Mr. Tulsi because we're running out of time with him. Mr. Tulsi, what's your response to that? Because you said that you cannot mandate even pro bono work because that will cause influence within the Bar Association or it would influence the working of lawyers who should remain independent. Do you agree with what Gaurang Kant is saying, that there should be some sort of mandate?
No, I agree that if there is a fund which is created from where the young lawyers who take up the pro bono matters can be paid a certain fee, that'll be a very good system and it can be adopted nationwide. But then whatever contribution we make to that fund must be made exempt from income tax, yes, because it will be unfair that we first have to pay the income tax and then also contribute to the fund.
Which is a fair point, which Justice Saldana pointed out when he was speaking, that it was in fact exempt from income tax. Rajiv Mishra.
मैं एक चीज़ आपको बताना चाहता हूँ, जैसे मैंने पहले बताया उसे इस बार बोल रहा हूँ कि अभी जो मैं लॉयर लोगों को सुन रहा हूँ जो कि मेरे लिए बहुत रिस्पेक्टेड पर्सन है ये लोग, उनके बारे में जब मैं देख रहा हूं तो ये बिल्कुल उसी तरह की बात कर रहे हैं जैसे चैरिटेबल बेड होने के चलते हॉस्पिटल जो चाहे वो फीस ले ले, जैसे आरटीई लागू होने के चलते स्कूल चाहे जो चाहे वो फीस ले ले, उसी तरह की बात करते ये दिखाई दे रहे हैं। मैं आपको एक बात बताता हूं कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने 1997 का शायद वो ऑर्डर है, उसमें बहुत क्लियर कर रखा है कि आपको फ्री लीगल एड सेल, एवरी बार काउंसिल में फ्री लीगल एड सेल बनाया जाना जरूरी है, जहां आप फ्री लीगल एड सेल में कौन कौन से एडवोकेट उसमें शामिल है उनका नाम आपको रखना है और उनको बताना है कि ये फ्री लीगल एड सेल किसको उपलब्ध होगा। ये बहुत क्लियर है। पे मैं केवल एक चीज बोल,
Are you telling me that it's not being implemented right now? कि अभी नहीं हो रहा है?
मेरा यही कहना है। पे ये जो भी बात कर रहे हैं प्रो बोनो की बात कर करके जो ये अपने फीस को डिफेंड करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, मैं ये कहना चाहता हूं फे कि देखो इनसे बहुत आशाएं हैं मुझे, ये इतने बड़े सीनियर लॉयर हैं कि ये चाहे तो क्रांतिकारी परिवर्तन आ सकता है। मैं इसलिए चूंकि एक सामान्य नागरिक हूं इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूं कि जब ये लोग अगर किसी चीज को हिडन करने की कोशिश करेंगे ना तो ये बहुत डेंजरस है भारत के सुनहरे भविष्य के लिए, और ये लोग स्तंभ हैं भारत के सुनहरे भविष्य को बनाने के लिए। इसलिए मेरा इनसे रिक्वेस्ट है कि यू प्रोसीड, आप लोग अगर पहल करोगे तो ही जुडिशरी में एक बड़ा बदलाव आ सकता है और गरीबों को भी समय पर और उचित न्याय मिल सकता है, और ये बिना आप लोगों के प्रयास के नहीं होगा। जब आप जैसे सीनियर लॉयर्स अपने इस तरह के फीस को अगर आप डिफेंड करते हुए नजर आओगे तो ये हम लोगों जैसे जो सामान्य लोग हैं जो आप लोगों पर बहुत भरोसा करते हैं उनके लिए दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण परिस्थिति है।
But Mr. Mishra, I'm just going to ask you this question again. There are two different things here. One is the fees that are being charged. The other is accessibility to lawyers' services. आपको नहीं लगता कि अभी अगर कोई भी इंसान हाई कोर्ट में जाना चाहता है या कंज्यूमर कोर्ट में जाना चाहता है कि वो लॉयर्स एक्सेसिबल नहीं है उनकी ब्रैकेट में?
फिर एक चीज तो मैं आपको
जूनियर लॉयर्स तो होंगे।
यस, जूनियर लॉयर्स हैं, लेकिन फिर एक चीज और है ना कि देखो आज जूनियर्स लॉयर्स को मैं बोल रहा हूं कि जुडिशरी में एक बड़े रिफॉर्म्स की आवश्यकता है, जो दीपक मिश्रा साहब जैसे लोग आज समझ रहे हैं कि जुडिशरी में एक बहुत बड़े रिफॉर्म्स की आवश्यकता है और उन्होंने इसके लिए पहल करना भी शुरू किया है। अब जैसे टीएस ठाकुर और दीपक मिश्रा, मेरी जहन में दो नाम ऐसे आते हैं जिन्होंने बहुत हद तक जुडिशियल रिफॉर्म्स की कोशिश की है, और ये कारण ये है फिर कि आज के समय में जो जूनियर्स लॉयर्स हैं आज आप देखो वो भी बड़े वकीलों के दबाव के नीचे पूरी तरह से कोर्ट में अगर आप जाओ जूनियर्स लॉयर को बोलने का मौका नहीं दिया जाता है। इवन जस्टिस दीपक मिश्रा ने भी इस बात को ऑब्जर्वेशन के साथ कहा है कि यहाँ पर लोग को जो सीनियर लॉयर्स हैं वो इतना ज़्यादा बोलते हैं कि जूनियर्स को बोलने का मौका नहीं मिलता है। तो ये जो चीज़ें हैं ना, फिर मैं बता रहा हूँ बहुत एक आसान तरीका और बताता हूँ। फिर जो ये डे बाय डे जो ये हियरिंग होती है या बहस होता है, मैं आपको बता दूँ एक रिटेन आर्गूमेंट का एक सिस्टम है कि अगर आपको डेली बहस नहीं करनी है तो आप अपना एक रिटन आर्गुमेंट सबमिट कर दीजिए जज के पास और आप बोल दीजिए कि मुझे जो कहना था ये मैंने रिटन के स्वरूप में आपको दे दिया है, अब आप इसी को ध्यान में रख के अपना फैसला सुना दीजिए। ये भी एक प्रोविजन है, बट कोई लॉयर आपको ये बताने को तैयार नहीं होगा कि आप ये रिटन आर्गुमेंट सबमिट कर दो। तो ये सब चीजें जो है ना, फिर मैं चूंकि मैं थोड़ा सा अभी कोर्ट कचहरी में जाता हूं तो मुझे थोड़ी जानकारी मिली है। मैं इन सीनियर्स लॉयर्स से ये अपेक्षा करता हूं कि दिस इज द टाइम, आप प्रोसीड करो इस जुडिशरी रिफॉर्म्स को और आगे बढ़ाने में। अगर जुडिशरी ऐसा कुछ आपसे एक्सपेक्ट करती है, अगर यहाँ जो हमारे प्रमुख मुख्य चीफ जस्टिस जो हैं वो अगर आपसे एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं कि आप लोग इसमें साथ दो, तो आप लोग सबसे पहले अपना हाथ आगे बढ़ाओ और उनको सपोर्ट करो। उनके इस ऑब्जर्वेशन को आप लोग भी अपना समर्थन दो, जिससे इस देश का हर गरीब अपने न्याय को कम से कम पाने में समर्थ हो सके। कार्यपालिका से उसकी आशाएं खत्म हो चुकी हैं, विधायिका से उसकी आशाएं खत्म हो चुकी हैं, अब सिर्फ एक न्यायपालिका उसके लिए दरवाजा बचा है।
Okay, Kamalika Ray on the phone line from Mumbai, and this is an interesting thing. Kamalika, go ahead.
Yes, I would be taking 5 minutes of the very dignified gentleman there. 4 points. First point is I'm a separated woman and I didn't have any knowledge of any legal person involved or any knowledge I had.
Yes.
And then I went to Miss Purvi Shah. I got her number from the internet. Google करके मुझे उनका कांटेक्ट मिला। उन्होंने फर्स्ट सेंटेंस जो मुझे बोला कि कैन यू अफोर्ड माय सर्विसेज, व्हेन आई टोल्ड हर द होल थिंग। फिर उन्होंने बोला कि 4 लाख आप मुझे देंगी, 2 लाख आप जब तक नहीं देंगी मैं आपका केस टेक ओवर ही नहीं करूंगी। When I paid her 2 lakhs, I told her that I don't have any source of income. I am unemployed. I am having a domestic violence case and I am already dependent on my relatives. But she took 2 lakhs of rupees. Then she turned completely unprofessional in all my cases she was handling. That was divorce filed by my husband and domestic violence case filed by me. 2 lakhs उनको दिया मैंने किसी भी हालत में, फिर उन्होंने कुछ भी नहीं किया। Nearly 6-7 months after that, I was suggested by the Mumbai High Court here, Mumbai Family Court, कि अगर आपको प्रॉब्लम हो रही है तो you can go to the legal services department. Yes. I went to the legal services department. The lady there, I won't be taking her name. She's an aged lady and she was there in the legal services and I was told that she is going to charge very nominal fee from me because I am not earning. What she did was she called me to her home in the evening and then she told us and my family, me and my family, that minimum 50,000 annually आपको देना पड़ेगा and signing amount 25,000. And then ये तो आपका केस अभी सालों तक चलेंगे तो annually you will be paying me this much of amount. And then when the case filing का जब date आया, then I got to hear from her assistant that she has flown to Canada, which she does every year. I was not informed.
Okay. Okay. So one second. Let me get our panel to respond to this, Mr. Sarabji. This is what we were talking about, and I'm sure my team right now is holding back the phone calls of people who are calling with instances like this that they want to share. And a lot of times, it happens with people who either don't know their rights or can't afford the lawyers. What's your response to the story you just heard?
Look here, this may be an unusual story. Don't generalize.
Okay.
I know during the emergency, many of us appeared free of charge for detainees and for newspapers which are bearing the brunt of the government's policy. Ultimately, it depends upon the individual. So long as the law realizes that he's a professional and not a businessman, that's the main thing that's important. Otherwise, bringing the law, giving these instances of one case, another case, that doesn't take one anywhere. And I don't think it's right to really discuss any particular person on the channel without that person having a chance to explain. Faye, we must realize as lawyers, and I take it we do, that on cases where people can't afford, and we believe in the cause they're espousing, we willingly give our services free of charge, and are happy to do so, and will continue to do so.
Well, I really appreciate that. A last word before we wrap up this discussion to Mr. Sundaram. Mr. Sundaram, for other people who just called in, who said that they believe they've been treated unfairly by a lawyer, what should they do? Who can they approach? Who should they talk to? How do they solve that problem?
Well, firstly, let me be the first person who agrees that law, like many other professions, whether you take medicine, whether you take accountants, anybody, you always have people who don't live up to what is expected of them, don't do what they ought to do. They then do not give the services required, which they're required to give. Unfortunately, this is a malaise which is in every single profession. But we cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's not forget that these are incidents which take place. They're very unfortunate. But please, let's not take it that this is the way of the profession at large. And you know, it's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? Is it not an anomaly? On the one hand, you say that there are senior lawyers who charge a lot for their services. How would they charge a lot for their services if they weren't rendering services? Obviously, they're rendering the services and therefore they're charging. Equally, there are lawyers who do not render charges, who thereafter, the word will go around, they will not be engaged. So far as people have been wronged by a lawyer in this kind of way, in a way which there has been a professional misconduct, you can always give a complaint to the Bar Council and the Bar Council will take action.
Yes.
The other point I want to tell you is, we all in our lives have experiences with a few bad fish here and there. But please do not therefore paint the whole barrel black. It's not so.
Okay, and how does one get in touch with the Bar Council, Mr. Sundaram?
No, the Bar Council, every state has its Bar Council. All you have to do is write a letter to the Secretary of the Bar Council and giving your complaint. If you have any feeling of professional misconduct by a lawyer, you just write to the Bar Council, address it to the Secretary of Bar Council and say, I want to place a complaint on so-and-so basis. They will communicate back with you and tell you the format in which to do it. And it can always be done. And let me say once again, I have my greatest sympathy for people who have been wronged by people in my profession as people have been wronged by people in other professions. But that does not mean that the answer to it, therefore, is to curb the fees.
Yes.
I don't see the correlation of one with the other. I don't see the correlation of professional misconduct being solved by curbing of fees. And this connection is where I'm having a bit of a problem.
All right. I have to wrap up this discussion, but I love when we can take an hour out of prime time television on Indian news and have such a brilliant conversation with such brilliant minds. I thank each of you for the time that you have given us this evening. It is much appreciated by myself and my viewers. In conclusion, just to wrap up what we've got so far, while the Supreme Court has suggested and expressed distress at the kind of fees that lawyers are charging, we must realize that there will be bad eggs in every profession. And the piece of information that is very interesting at this point is that if you feel that you have been wronged by a lawyer, remember all lawyers who practice have to be members of the Bar Association of their respective states. If you feel you have been wronged by a lawyer for some form of professional misconduct, get in touch with the Bar Association and file a complaint against that lawyer. So we can separate the bad eggs then from the rest. And of course, suggestions here of pools or funds of money that lawyers can donate to that can be used for representation of poor. But fundamentally, it comes down to one thing, that it is difficult for an average Indian citizen, middle class or otherwise, to understand the law, to understand their rights, to understand a legal document. A lot of times, law is practiced in English. Most of the people in our country can't read English, and that then makes it very, very difficult for them. That then makes courts very scary places. Unless we can make law accessible in that sense, where people understand it, they understand their rights, they understand their fees, they understand what they can and cannot expect, it's going to be a difficult cat to bell. I again thank our guests for joining us, and this is a very, very interesting conversation. We're going to see how the government of India decides to take this forward. We're going to be in continued conversation with members of the legal fraternity to understand how we can make law more accessible and justice more accessible to the average Indian. Thanks for watching.